A warm welcome to this Huhtamaki Think Circle roundtable discussion. Today's topic is accessible, affordable, and safe food in an uncertain world. Does food packaging have a role? My name is Katri Makkonen, and I will be moderating today's discussion. So, why are we here? Huhtamaki created the Think Circle so that people could work on sustainability together across the value chain and learn from each other and, of course, act together. We have 5 wonderful guests around our virtual roundtable today. Let's do a quick round of introductions before really digging in, and we'll go in alphabetical order. First up is London. Welcome, Nadiya Catel-Arutyunova. You work as a sustainability policy advisor at the British Retail Consortium. Can you tell us what do you do and what is the British Retail Consortium?
Of course. Good afternoon, Katri, and good afternoon, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here this afternoon and taking part in this fascinating conversation. So the British Retail Consortium is the leading trade body for the retail industry in the UK. We have over 170 members operating the usual bricks and mortar stores, but also operating online. Our purpose is, of course, to create a positive policy and economic environment for the retail industry and its customers. We've done a lot of work, on various campaigns, and of course, climate and environment has been very high on our agenda. We've put together the Climate Action Roadmap, which is our commitment to net zero by 2040. And as far as my work consists, well, I'm covering everything related to sustainability, circular economy, working with our members on resource efficiency of products, sustainable management of resources, and that includes, of course, things like recycling and sustainable packaging. So all of that, of course, through the lens of how can we help customers to live low carbon lifestyles.
Thank you so much, Nadiya, and great to have you with us today. And moving from London to Brussels, where we have Elsi Katainen, member of the European Parliament, a fellow Finn. Good to see you, Elsi.
Good to see you too.
Thank you. You're a policymaker and vice president of the European Parliament's Agriculture Committee. What's your biggest concern when it comes to food right now?
Yes, in the Agricultural Committee, the food is the most important topic, and food security is one of the key themes, especially right now in this globally uncertain times. And maybe this is the biggest concern about in our committee, the food security. We mustn't take it for granted, and food packaging is naturally an important part of this all, especially in food safety.
Thank you so much, Elsi. Good to have you with us also. And our next panelist, Eric Lelay, represents Huhtamaki, the organizer of today's discussion. Eric, you're president of the Fiber and Foodservice Europe-Asia-Oceania business at Huhtamaki. And I read somewhere that you call yourself a packaging boy. What do you mean by it?
Good afternoon, first of all, everyone. Well, it simply means that I have already a long career behind me, and 2/3 of this career is in packaging, mostly in 2 companies, Amcor and Huhtamaki. So I think I know pretty well what plastic is and what fiber and paper is. That's what it means.
So I already tried in a few words, but maybe you could also tell us in more detail, why does Huhtamaki want to have these roundtable discussions?
I think it's part of our mission to explain, promote, educate. We are full of passion for packaging. And we also believe there's a lot of wrong perceptions around packaging. We have a CEO that says often that packaging is not the problem and it's the solution in many cases. I cannot agree more with him. We live in a strange period, I think we are at the turning point of our evolution. my generation believe that resources are infinite on this planet, and you can simply consume, transform, and throw away. The generation of my children has new perceptions, and they believe that the planet is clearly not what it should be, and therefore our responsibility, and I really strongly feel this responsibility, which is to leave behind us a better planet for our kids so that they can continue to live this beautiful life that we have. So we have the duty to create a circular economy and make sure that we don't continue with this linear model that we have. So that's our mission at Huhtamaki, and of course packaging is at the core of this.
That's a great mission, Eric. Thank you so much. And the next panelist, Patricia Lopez, your Environmental Affairs Manager at FoodDrinkEurope. Welcome, Patricia. And what is FoodDrinkEurope? Can you tell us that, please?
Yes, thank you, first of all, for having me today. It's really great that we are able to contribute to this discussion on packaging circularity and sustainability. So FoodDrinkEurope is the European organization for the food and drink industry. We represent the largest manufacturing sector in the EU. We also have a big variety of within our membership from all the food and drink producers, most of the food and drink producing sectors and larger companies. We, of course, are at the center of the discussion of sustainable food systems and engage pretty much within it. We have built last year together with other organizations in the food value chain and the European Commission. We have built and contributed to the signature of the EU Code of Conduct for Sustainable Food Systems that brings up the main elements and commitments to build a more sustainable food system in the EU. We've also delivered our roadmap to support industries to reach zero carbon emissions. In my work, in my specific role in the federation, is more based on circular economy and packaging and environmental information. We have been kept quite busy in the last years, and we will keep busy on this area in the next years on packaging sustainability and circularity.
I think there's a lot of people busy around the same issue here, and that's really good.
Yeah.
Thank you. And one more panelist to go, Pekka Pesonen, Secretary General of Copa Cogeca. Your organization calls itself the United Voice of Farmers and Agri-Cooperatives in the EU. What's your main concern, Pekka?
Well, at the moment, we very much talk about how to incorporate increased sustainability with the sufficient supply of foodstuffs. I think it's all too obvious for us all when we look at the international situation going on now in Ukraine. It is a devastating development for the people involved with this, especially in Ukraine. But it's also important for us to note how dependent we are on international trade, and how we need to secure these production chains so that we can actually deliver safe, sustainable, affordable, high quality food for our millions of citizens and consumers. So therefore, it's crucially important that we also draw lessons from the ongoing crisis.
We hope that we'll be able to, already today talk about those lessons a bit. But we're all set to start the discussion now. Before we start, I want you, the audience, to know that we want you to join in. So please write your questions and comments in the Q&A box. And it's on the right-hand side of your video stream. But do note that if you're viewing the video in full screen mode, you won't be able to see the box. But please leave your comments and questions there. And we will get going. Like I said, The theme is accessible, affordable, and safe food in an uncertain world. And right now, of course, it's an understatement to say uncertain, as we seem to be moving from crisis to crisis. The war in Ukraine, the COVID pandemic, global warming. So many of you already mentioned in your opening statements some of the challenges, but could you name more of the challenges that the food system is facing right now? Who wants to start? That's a broad question, but please just raise your hand. Maybe, yep, Elsi, go ahead, please.
Thank you. That's a very hard question, but it is very important also, especially these days and these times. In my opinion, we need food which is produced in Europe with our strict rules also. The most important on the food and farming is that we have a strong European production to secure supply and food for our own citizens, and more to refugees who are coming to Europe. This doesn't mean protectionism or closing the trade. Instead, we should be there more and more active than we are nowadays. The global trade has an important value, but to create a reliable global food system, we can't depend on only the source of supply, and we need to be prepared to feed not only our current citizens, but to mitigate different type of global food crises. The food system is globally under a great threat at the moment. In Europe, we have enjoyed for a long time for a good situation. We have had a good food secure, and the food and its producers are often taken for granted. And this is a big mistake. The general idea for many people has been that we can rely on international trade, and adequate self-sufficient hasn't been a priority.
What do others here think? Elsi said that we've been used to taking food for granted, and now we really need to step up. I think, Pekka, for example, you've noted that most people nowadays don't have a link to agriculture anymore.
Looking at things from the whole value chain perspective, I think it's fair to say that we need to be able to justify our actions to the general public. And this is very much also the case for packaging. We need to explain how we produce food, what are the ingredients, what are the inputs, how do we do this, and how do we sell our agricultural goods forward to the consumer market, but first being processed. Also, we have huge differences within the downstream industry, downstream chain operators when it comes to catering and retail. And this was something that we learned from the COVID-19, how different we actually are. But also packaging was very much a part of this discussion. And while we talk about what sort of packages and do we protect foodstuffs and their freshness and their quality and their safety, we also have the same thing at farm level. And actually quite recently, we have been talking about this amongst our members and our stakeholder within our stakeholder group. And increasingly, we also have to take care of the foodstuffs or the raw materials that we use in a way that they will maintain their high quality and safe use. And very latest that we came across was very much linked with the relief effort to the Ukrainian agriculture and Ukrainian society, when we contacted the EU institutions and we were talking about how to do this. And their message was very clear. You need to ensure that the products that you deliver, that you try to help with, would be in proper packaging, that we know what they are and they are safe to use, and we are able to send them to the destinations and the individuals and the organizations that they need them. So basically, all along the value chain, we are talking about packages and how they would bring in added value to the agri-food chain of Europe.
Well, what Elsi said was, you focused, of course. Oh, Patricia, please comment. Yeah, go ahead.
Yes, thank you very much. I just wanted to build on what Pekka and Mrs. Katainen said before on safety of food, and also in view of the circularity of packaging and options to improve the sustainability of packaging. And it is Mrs. Katainen mentioned food security, but it's also something that is given that food would be safe because we have a strong regulatory framework in Europe to make that to ensure that. And what we want to still make sure is that premise is kept in the upcoming in the future when we have more circular packaging, and which will mean that we reconsider many options for the design of our packaging. And we want to make sure that the framework of safety of food and the functionality of packaging, the first functionality of packaging, which is protecting foodstuffs, is ensured in order to be able to make sure that that we have more sustainable packaging, but that making with the content of such packaging still being usable and safe, which is what all citizens we believe would like to have.
What I was going to comment is that Elsi was talking about the European food system, but obviously this is a global question. It's not just a Europe question. So would somebody want to... Yep, Nadiya, go ahead, elaborate on this.
Thank you, Katri. I think based in the UK, I would bring a bit of a more sort of a, unfortunately, non-EU version to that conversation, because I think that the global food system is at the moment really being tested. It has been tested by the biggest public health crisis and followed now by a war. So really, every industry, every sector is really working under pressure, and that pressure is reflected on, in various ways on the food system. I know, for example, in the UK at the moment, the retail industry is facing, insane amount of disruptions in the labor side of things, on the sourcing aspect, on logistics, and all of that actually puts the emphasis on the need to have a resilient and self-sufficient system. So I think it's very important that we don't forget the role of the packaging, especially when we were at the heart of the pandemic. I think there's a lot of learnings that we can take from that as well. A lot of people were locked in their homes and actually interacted with packaging more than ever before. E-commerce skyrocketed. There were groceries deliveries at home, so people have been interacting with packaging online from what they could see, but also then at home, and all of that has changed a lot of, I think, of perceptions, because people started to care about packaging and the product and the packaging footprint. So all of that is obviously changing the dynamics of the food system to some extent.
Pekka, you've talked about how blockchain, the implementing of a blockchain system could be a big part of the answer to future disruptions. What do you mean by that? Why?
Well, for most of us, it is important to have reliable data when we plan ahead for our actions, and in the case of farmers, for the investments. And especially this is the case for the new initiatives and the requirements for farmers for sustainability. It's about environment, it's about climate, it's about biodiversity, animal welfare, and so on. And then most of the time we have to do this rather blindfolded, and therefore it would play an important role that we could increase the security and the knowledge of the marketplace by knowing much more precisely what the consumers actually would be interested in and how much would they be prepared to pay for it. And so therefore we see initiatives like blockchain and a good opportunity to develop a system where we could increase this certainty for the operators, not only for farmers, but other operators too, to make that necessary investment. So basically, it's very much about two-way street to get the knowledge, get the information, and making sure that the investment would actually pay off in case I can do that. Because then I can make a reliable, based on the reliable data, I can make my own decisions and whether I can actually compete with the conditions that the consumers or some other stakeholders in the value chain would expect me to deliver their goods for. And so in the sense, it would increase our certainty. And that is desperately needed now, especially when we are looking into huge holes in the supplies of the EU market when we have lost the Ukrainian operators altogether.
Any comment on this idea? Does it sound like something that should be done, Patricia?
Yes, I think just building on the need for data, looking into the upcoming increased interactions along the food value chain in order to address sustainability challenges and such as decreasing the environmental footprint of food production and packaging circularity. I think it is going to specifically, and I shared that views with Pekka, to increase the exchange of information between the different steps of the food production and packaging production in order to be able to have an overview of the life cycle impacts of the production of food. Also, in view of what we are hearing at European level of about upcoming initiatives or under development of the digital product passports, as well as the collection of data to calculate environmental footprints and the future sustainable food system policy framework. All of those elements will work together to be able to have a more comprehensive and overarching approach to addressing sustainability of food. So pretty much aligned, and we as producers are as the food and drink industry has a central element in the value chain, but of course as well as retailers and farmers, and so that factor of data exchange will have to be pretty much enhanced in the future as of today. Yeah.
I maybe taking a step back here. Accessible, affordable, and safe food. Is it too big a question to ask you to define what that actually means? I mean, who can say what is accessible, what is affordable, and what is safe? Are there common rules? Does it depend on who I'm going to ask? What are we aiming for here? It might be too big a question, but Eric, please try.
No, I think it's not it's a very, very interesting question. And I think what we did realize during those crises that we had, whether it's the war or the pandemic, is the essential nature of packaging. I was sitting one day in Brussels with a commissioner, and I would say pleased, but also very surprised to hear that they were proud to say that every day they could make sure that the food would be delivered on the table of consumers in Europe. And that was mostly because of packaging. And packaging does not exist on its own, but it's really an integral part of value chain. Any failure of this food packaging supply chain will have a significant effect on food supply chains. And for instance, during those pandemics or even during the war, what we see is that our factories are running. And believe me, it's not been easy during the pandemic. You have to protect your employees as well and make sure that they are not getting ill. But we had the duty to make sure that our factories would continue to operate to be able to supply the packaging for the food to be delivered every day. So it's what I mean by accessible and affordable and safe food. And for instance, Huhtamaki or any serious company in packaging would never compromise on the safety. Never.
Nadiya.
I agree with what Eric just said. I think if retailers have managed to put the food on the shelves in Europe during the COVID crisis is also due to the fact that we've had a resilient other industries and sectors behind us who enabled those products to reach those shelves in the first place. So definitely support Eric's point. Or actually, we realized there were some key essential workers actually operating, those factories as well. So this is definitely an important element there. I think for the retail industry, those three principles are really sort of a golden thread. Ideally, we'd like to never compromise on them, and that's, I think, the ambition. But of course, in times of crisis, it's always a bit of a balancing act for retailers trying to deliver those three principles and facing, all the challenges that we've just mentioned about the logistics and the supply chain shortages as well.
Okay. Talking about the food chain, I think we can't escape the question of food waste. And why is food waste so important to minimize? What is food waste's role in all of this? Yep, Elsi, go ahead. And then Eric.
Yes, the food waste is a bigger issue than we used to think, and it concerns about us all. The whole food chain must work together and share the responsibility to make the food system sustainability. Currently, a lot of proposals from leaders are unbalanced and shift the pressure mainly to the producers by only limiting their tools without anything new to offer to replace them. Food packaging can help to give consumers, because I want to talk about food packaging because this is the Huhtamaki event, reliable information on nutrition and make fresh food more available by products, achieving longer shelf life. Instead of an expense, packaging can make products more cost efficient by reducing the waste. And EU has invested on research and innovations through Horizon funding, and I was happy to be a rapporteur for the dossier back for a few years ago in the Agri Committee, and I see the importance to invest for research both in public and private funds. And I see that we as a policymakers has responsibility to make legislation which is implementable for European companies and understand for our citizens, so the trust for EU doesn't get any weakened. In addition to sharing responsibilities within food chain, we must ensure that whole chain works together, and industry and farmers need to think together about food packaging also.
Thanks, Elsi. Let's stick to food waste for a second. Who's the other person who had a hand up when I asked about the meaning and the importance? Yep, Eric, please. Food waste.
I think I will not teach anyone what food waste is, but there are some really shocking figures on food waste. When you know that 1/3 of the food is wasted in the world, and that you have about 9 to 10% of the global population which is starving. So those two things are really in contradiction and deeply shocking for me. And 9 to 10%, it's how many. I live in this beautiful little country, Finland. That's how many times Finland. This 9 to 10%, it's more than Europe, okay, which is starving every day. And again, I think the packaging looks like nothing, but it's packaging for me. I had a teacher at the university when I was younger, and he was saying that the fridge was the main reason why people were living longer. And for me, packaging is as important as the fridge. Okay, it helps to preserve the food, extend its shelf life, mitigate this waste, and I hope, and one day we'll have less people starving every day because of our packaging products. Okay.
Patricia, did you want to add something to the food waste discussion?
I think it's just to repeat. It was. I think it was already said by the previous speakers, panelists, about the role of packaging to reduce food waste and the figures around food waste, which are still quite staggering. So just nothing to add on that.
Okay, thank you. And when we're talking about food waste or packaging, a huge thing to work on is recycling the package. So how much is being recycled right now? Who has some figures for me? Maybe on a European level. Eric, yes, go ahead.
Well, if you take recycling, I think plastic is recycled at about 41%. That's usually the number that everyone has in his head. And we would say that probably paper or fiber packaging is recycled at more than 84%, I would say. Okay, and we could increase those numbers. But recycling and collecting is a global responsibility, and we do not do this enough. And we have different partners in the value chain where we try to move things, but we need more hands. We need to educate consumers, okay, and it works well in certain countries. We need the regulators to help us. For instance, if you would, rather than make a reuse compulsory or promote reuse, make recycling and collecting compulsory with clear targets, that would help us to install and implement this circular economy that everyone is looking for.
Continuing on that, you've said that many politicians remain skeptical of the merits of packaging in general, and in particular to recyclable solutions. What do you mean? Eric, this was, I think I was quoting you, hopefully, that you think that politicians remain skeptical of the merits of packaging in general, and in particular to recyclable solutions.
Yeah, I think when you take decisions, whether it's in Europe or somewhere else, you need to take decisions on data. And what we did at Huhtamaki and also at the Alliance of Paper Packaging in Europe, which I have the pleasure to chair, we commissioned different studies. One of them was done by Rumble, a very professional firm that is referenced by Brussels. And what you see with this life cycle analysis is that the single-use items are way more interesting in terms of sustainability than reusable items. Okay, and I will not make a lecture here, but if you take very simple things, if you would replace in all the restaurants the single-use items by reuse, you would simply put in the traffic 1 million petrol cars more every year, or you would increase the consumption of water by a city of the size of Helsinki. Okay, that's what it means, and that's what I mean by this.
So, Elsi, you're a politician, obviously. Do you see politicians as being skeptical towards recycling?
I wouldn't admit that at all. As a matter of fact, it's a good moment to tell about our committee working. Currently, we are in Agri Committee. We are waiting to handle 2 legislation sets. which are important for food packaging, and I think that we are really trying to do things to improve. The first is a new Commission's initiative called Sustainable EU Food System. It is an initiative aimed to integrate sustainability deeper into all food related policies, and it will create new set of general principles and objectives and lay down requirements and responsibilities of all actors in the EU food system. And another important policy initiative is the Sustainable Product Initiative, which Commission has proposed yesterday. Here, European co-legislators will have a big debate on the future of sustainable products and eco-design, and packaging is part of that. So I think we believe in what we do and we see the importance of that.
Nadiya, moving to your comment, because I think you've said that we need a systems change when it comes to recycling. Can you tell what you mean by it?
Absolutely. I think we are at a tipping point now where it's not just about mandating things for producers or the industry side of things. We need to have a coherent approach to everyone involved in the recycling, and that means performance uplifts from everybody, for producers, manufacturers, from retailers, but also from the municipalities and the consumers involved. When I was referring to a system change, is that we need policies that not only are well designed and come at the right time and sort of incentivize the right things, but I think in Europe, especially, what we're seeing now is we are overly reliable on exports, and I think there is here something that should be done in some shape or form. I think by politicians, we need that infrastructure in the UK and Europe to reprocess the materials that we actually put on the market, and that also means that we need to have very optimized collection and sorting systems. We need to see investment also channeling to that end of life of products and packaging, so that after, when we have the recycled content, the recycled materials, they can be re-injected in the manufacturing processes that are also located in Europe. So it's all about creating that virtuous loop, and we need the legislation. We need the right legislation, well designed and at the right time to make it happen. And ultimately, this will give also the visibility and certainty for businesses to start investing, because we're talking about millions here that needs to be invested in Europe.
Patricia, I could see you nod your head. You agree with Nadiya here?
Yeah, pretty much so. Here in the EU, we are about to have an overhaul of the legislation on packaging, and they will be focusing on packaging design more specifically. So how to improve the design of packaging to match the objectives of the circular economy. And we are more than ready to join in the stream and to contribute and to design for recycling. But what we have been calling for over the last months already to policymakers, especially the Commission, is to establish a list of policy enablers that will help us achieve these objectives. Because as Nadiya has said, and Ms. Katainen as well, we can do part of the work, but the end of the value chain, the end of life of packaging, needs to be, the effort needs to be mirrored in this end, and investments in infrastructure, in technologies are needed at collection and recycling, as well as development of innovative recycling techniques, because there will be ways with current techniques, or we will not be able to address all the recycling that we need to have in the food sector as we speak. Also, because not only this policy revision will be focused on design for recycling, but also on reintroduction of recycled materials. And so we also need facilities to reacquire food safe recycled materials for food and drink packaging, especially for plastic. And so we need all these policy elements in place in parallel to the specific policy legislation that will be developed for packaging design and the packaging that we use in the food sector.
Patricia, you've said that people take packaging for granted. Why is that a problem?
I think it's that from what we see, packaging is perceived as something citizens or consumers don't realize of the actual functionality of packaging in their everyday lives, and it tends to be demonized because, of course, it's present with every food item that you buy because it's needed for its safety function, or a food for preserving the freshness and the quality and the safety of food. And so it's something that in the context that we are living now with food security, if something would cause the shortages of packaging, then we would actually realize of the actual functionality and how relevant it is for the current food systems nowadays.
Well, what should or could be done in order to make people realize the importance and also the good sides of packaging? For example, Pekka, when you think about packaging, because you're not in the packaging business, Eric, I know you are and you want to answer, and I will let you answer, but just to get, Pekka, what do you think about packaging? Is it waste or is it something good in the circular business? What's your point of view here?
Well, if you look at the consumer relation with the packaging, it is a fundamental part of the package image and the image of the foodstuffs itself. I think we all agree to that. It carries also the relevant information. It is about the design. It's about some crucial elements like sale, best sale date, best before date. It's about also portion size. It's about possible combination with other foodstuffs in the actual usage. It's actually quite versatile when it comes to the consumer behavior and the consumer need. And we recognize this role that the packaging has. And it actually will go further, because when we talk about these smart solutions that we have incorporated into the packaging, it will actually help us also to preserve the freshness and safety of the product in a way that we never had before. And these smart solutions already exist, and we find it extremely useful, because then this is exactly the point that we would like to also utilize from farming perspective. It's very much about the information and then the further information that the consumer may need. And therefore, we will remain loyal to the packaging industry in the sense that we won't be able to survive without it. But like I said, in the case of Ukraine, it has been a bit of a surprise to some stakeholders when we have been in contact with the commission people, and how central, how critical, how crucially important the packaging actually is in order to get things moving and organize our logistics. If we had just bulk products, even in agriculture itself, it has a role to play, because, for instance, when we talk to the Commission about the necessary seed deliveries to the Ukrainian agriculture that they may be having some difficulty with at the moment, they underlined very clearly in the very beginning of the discussion that can you please deliver the necessary volumes, and if you have any in the packaging that we can handle without creating any additional bottlenecks in the system, meaning the bulk storage space. And so therefore, while we recognize the consumer link, we also see this as an enabler in our value chain in general. And I think this is a crucial element that we also need to be communicating with other stakeholders, so that by using efficient and suitable packaging solutions, we actually make things move much more efficiently and right on time, right on the spot where they are needed to be.
Eric.
Yeah, it's when you talk about value chain, there's something that I wanted to say when we looked at the project that Europe is trying to implement, like SUPD or PPWD, we were challenged. So that was the good thing, that when you're challenged is that you start to wonder and ask questions. And the value chain that we have for packaging in Europe is, first of all, that it's Europe. It's 100% based in Europe. It's 120 billion euros of value. Which is even bigger than the value chain of the meat. It's really, really big. It's almost 400,000 people living from it, and it's a beautiful value chain. It's completely local. It's based in Europe. From the forest management to raw materials production, transformation of those raw materials into products, collecting, recycling, all this is in Europe, and it's serving the same purpose. So it's sorry if I'm so passionate about packaging, but that's really a beautiful value chain. And again, it's we really want to see a resource-efficient circular economy. There are many things we can do for this. We can use digital technologies. You were talking about blockchain, but we also have the possibility to use digital technologies to make packaging traceable, but also more easily recycled, okay, and collected. And again, if you take a single paper cup, a single item like this, you can recycle this up to 15 times without affecting the value of the fiber, and remanufacture the same products almost indefinitely.
Eric, when you talk about it, it sounds beautiful, but still, even you have said that many people just think about trash when they think about packaging. So how to make the image better and not, because it is a fact. Whose responsibility?
Mrs. Katainen.
Yeah. Maybe Elsi, you can tell us how to make the image better, please.
Well, I was going to raise some opportunities for the sector, and from the legislation point of view and from the Parliament's point of view, and I want to talk a little about LULUCF and carbon farming, which have a connection to packaging. And last month has been very busy in my office on the negotiations of LULUCF regulation, which is some kind of accounting tool for land use change, and forestry carbon sequestration. In the negotiations, carbon storage products has been one topic too, and I see the packaging which is wood-based from sustainable management forests could be one kind of carbon storage product. It is recyclable and renewable and replace fossil-based products, and carbon farming is another hot topic in the European Parliament, but its applications in legislation are not clear yet. I see that it is crucial that farmers get compensated for the carbon sinks they produce, and this can be a good opportunity for both create a carbon negative society and get additional income to agriculture. And this could be the story. that people don't see packaging just trash.
And obviously, we need better packaging, so we need more research and innovation. Elsi, you also already mentioned Horizon Europe. But Pekka, you've said that we need to start phasing out plastics for more sustainable packaging materials. Do you have any ideas on how?
Well, we've been involved with the Commission initiative to reduce plastics in the first place. It's kind of natural phenomena in better use of our natural resources. Mainly until now, the plastic products and packaging has actually come from fossil fuel. We may have to find some new solutions for this, but in general, we need to be much more targeted. We need to think ahead where and how and when we do this, and can we actually reduce it? Because then, especially when it comes to food safety, we have to respect the standards. We have to make sure that foodstuffs and the raw materials, feed, for instance, will remain safe for use. But then I think it's also about recycling. And this is where farmers and farming communities in all member states have been very active, and we would expect that this would actually increase. So while we have to use, at least to a certain extent, some of the materials and also materials that come from, let's say, fossil sources, we should increase the recyclability of these products. And there's a very good feeling in amongst the farming community in promoting this kind of action. It's been there for instance, for fertilizer sector, and especially the recollection of some of those products and packaging that has been seen as a let's say problematic element for our production, and we see that this should be further incorporated into the value chains. So we are quite motivated to do that, because then it is not only that we see this from the value of the product side, but then it's also to take care of your environment. So it's just to make sure that you wouldn't have any let's say material hanging around and lying around in the yards of farms, and they wouldn't end up in actual value chain itself. And by this I mean that one particular item quite recently that we have come across is microplastics, and how we should avoid these from getting into the value chain. So we haven't, let's say, been active in that area yet, but I believe that would be the next step, where we need to take a look into what we can do to avoid that too.
Well, how can we make sure that there is enough innovation? Whose responsibility is that? Nobody wants to take the responsibility. No, sorry, I'm just joking. But I mean,
Sorry.
well, Patricia, yeah, Patricia and Eric, let's go that way.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. So I want to say that already there is a big part of the food industry that is looking into innovations to improve the packaging design, to look forward circularity and ways to reduce, to recycle, to reduce, to address all the elements of the waste hierarchy. I think the industry is also joining initiatives along the value chain, from producers to recyclers, to address and identify what are the issues that hamper the packaging recyclability and design, and that is an important source for innovation for our members these days. And so a big part of that innovation is already coming from packaging users, and I am sure that also the recyclers are also developing new technologies to address recycling, for example, of more lightweight multi-layer packaging, and we are seeing a lot of platforms and initiatives along those lines. So that's already coming from the part of with the support of the private sector and as what we know from the food and drink industry. But I believe also there are other lines of investment in innovation happening at the institutional level, etc., which need to be maybe enhanced in the coming years.
Eric, did you want to comment?
Well, there's no future without any innovation. So when you run a company, you need to invest regularly on innovation. You can look at packaging as a way of preserving food or transporting food. You can look at packaging with another angle, which is protect the brand of your customers. And those customers innovate all the time. So you need to follow their innovation path. But now there are other dimensions. If you look at the regulations, we are innovating in many different dimensions because we need to create a different world tomorrow. So innovation is at the core of everything we do.
Nadiya.
Yes, thank you. I guess want to bring some perspectives from the role of retail business in supporting innovation in packaging, and obviously that only matters to the extent that retailers can only influence their own labeled packaging, their own branded packaging. When it comes to third-party packaging, it's all about collaboration, partnership. But for their own packaging, retailers have been, investing massively over the last decade in packaging optimization. The packaging teams actually have been, I would say, put on steroids, hiring packaging specialists, looking at how they can tweak the packaging specs, always looking for different offerings in store, different new experiences in store for customers, incorporating recycled content, designing for recyclability. So all of that has been happening already for quite some time, and sometimes actually on a voluntary business-led sort of initiatives. I guess one point I wanted to bring here is that the sort of the sustainability story that packaging has to tell, and I think even louder now, we need to make sure that greenwashing is no longer happening around packaging, that people understand what it is really about and what it is not. And we definitely, I think retailers have a role here to guide customers and help them to have the most informative decisions in front of them.
Great question from the audience. Can we feed Europe or the world without packaging? Eric was saying no.
That's an obvious answer for me, yes.
Okay. And there's another question. Did somebody want to comment?
I did, yes. No.
Oh, exactly. And
we can't live without packaging. Quite clear that we can't live without packaging. I was answering the previous question just shortly about we taking the responsibility. I think that every part of the chain must take response. Every part our responsibility, and for me the importance to keep the door open and not only look for one solution in the main. We have new innovations coming all the time, and we cannot afford to rule out possible options. We must have funding from public but also from private sources.
One last question from the audience. What is the biggest problem for the packaging industry? The biggest problem? Can they be listed? Nadiya, I see you might want to answer. Or Patricia
I'd like to answer with just one problem. The challenge there is that there's so many actually, and I think it's really about from my perspective, it would be really about the consumer, making sure that the consumer realizes that when you buy food, you're also buying packaging, and that there needs to be proper communication, proper education systems in place, and ultimately system, collections and recycling, so that people are confident that when they want to do the right thing, and many are actually the Gen Z, millennials, Gen Z generation, they really want to do the right thing. So that the structures are in place to support that, actually.
We've just run out of time, but I think that's a very good ending to it. Maybe we all want to do the right thing. So thank you so much, dear panelists. It was a very good discussion. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you to our audience as well. And see you in the next Think Circle.